This November is seriously a month for the ages. A new season of the Dragon Prince dropped, then Black Panther Wakanda Forever, and now Pokémon Scarlet and Violet are almost here. So just like I discussed the first Black Panther film in my previous video, I'm going to talk about the latest Pokémon game in this one. Let's head to Hisui.
I am that which humans call Arceus.
Honestly, Pokémon Sword left me so disappointed that I was losing faith in the Pokémon franchise's ability to make good games. The story wasn't all that, the gameplay was stale, and there was so little to keep me emotionally invested. Pokémon Legends Arceus though is a different story altogether. I enjoyed it tremendously and it rekindled my hope in Pokémon. This isn't going to be a full review because I think that's been done to death, but I will give a short overview of my thoughts on the game. In case you don't know, Pokémon Legends Arceus is set in the Hisui region, which is the old name for the Sinnoh region introduced in Generation 4. It deviates from previous games in that it is far more open world and has overworld mechanics. And the story is different too, being an isekai in which the main character is charged with completing the first ever Pokédex. First of all, the game is surprisingly beautiful. I thought the muted colors were strange at first, but I eventually started to feel like it's fitting. The game seems to take visual cues from classical Japanese art, which does seem to have a lot of muted colors. Graphics wise though, it has a huge issue with pixelation when your character enters dark caves. I don't know how this could possibly have happened, but it's extremely disappointing for an otherwise beautiful game. The game is a very interesting mix of familiar and unfamiliar. Apricorn Pokeballs are back, which is something I was very happy to see since Pokemon Silver was my first game. They even gave us new types of Pokeballs, something I hope they continue to do in the future. Just like previous games, they introduced regional variants of beloved Pokemon, some of which I really love. One thing I feel sad about is that they didn't allow breeding in this game. One of my methods of completing the Pokédex in other games is to catch evolved Pokemon and breed them for their previous forms. So not being able to breed made the process of completing the Pokédex a bit more tedious, but I understand why they did it, since Pokemon eggs weren't discovered until Generation 2. Speaking of mixing familiar and unfamiliar, somebody needs to explain to me how come Gyarados can fly. I mean, yes, I understand it's a flying type, but the franchise has been around for decades at this point, and I've never seen any evidence of it flying. This seems like some sort of plot hole to me. Part of me feels like they planned to give it a Hisuian form that was a water dragon type and could fly, but they scrapped the idea. In case you don't know, the Gyarados line is a reference to a Chinese legend of a koi fish that became a dragon when it jumped to the top of a waterfall, which is why there is a flying Gyarados at the top of a waterfall in Hisui, showing off the new overworld catching mechanic. In any case, it's weird that the ancient Gyarados can fly, but the modern one, of the very same type, can't. Oh, and by the way, there is one thing that gives me hope for the future of Pokemon games. I always found it weird that a newly hatched Pokemon is exactly the same size as an older one, but Legends Arceus introduces visible size differences between Pokemon. Some of them are gigantic compared to their smaller counterparts, so maybe future games will have newly hatched Pokemon be smaller and we get to watch them grow? That would be awesome. I also like the fact that the overworld gameplay allows us to interact with our Pokemon a bit more directly in this game. While we can't pet them like we can our Chow in Sonic Adventure 2, we get to sort of chat with them. Plus it was cool to see them go to sleep when I left them out of their balls for a while. Very adorable, I must say. It's also very cool that they tried to make the Pokemon battles look a bit more realistic. Pokemon actually move towards their opponents to strike them or attack them with some cool Kamehameha wave animations. Plus, Pokemon that can't swim float on some wooden devices in water battles instead of the weird cutscene battles of previous games. Swimming Pokemon float above the ground though, which is still very weird, but at least they are taking a step in the right direction. It's worth noting that this is Pokemon playing catch up with other RPG franchises, not being innovative. Final Fantasy VIII had characters moving towards their opponents long before Pokemon made the jump to full 3D. I hope they keep catching up though. In terms of the story, Pokémon Legends Arceus deviates considerably from the traditional Pokémon game. In a sense, it's basically Pokémon meets the Chronicles of Narnia, but instead of a Jesus lion, you have a God llama. In this game, you play as someone that Arceus brings into the Hisui region, presumably from another time. With no memory of where you came from, you journey to earn everyone's trust while completing the task Arceus set for you. There is one issue I have with this isekai story though. Typically, isekai stories like this end with the main characters either returning to where they came from or making the decision to stay behind in the new world. This game doesn't do that. We don't know where we came from, don't learn any important lessons to carry back home, and don't get the chance to make the decision to stay in Hisui. I can understand why they did it this way in a sense, considering being able to go back home would mean our journey has ended and no more catching Pokemon in post-game. But I'm sure they could have come up with some way to make it happen. The story would have been more impactful that way. They might have intended to do something like that in the game, by the way, and it was scrapped. Data miners have found a modern day room complete with a Nintendo Switch. It isn't clear whether this was initially planned to be featured at the beginning or end of the game or both, but it is some evidence that maybe they were planning a more traditional isekai ending. So all in all, Pokémon Legends Arceus was a fun game that I really enjoyed. There were some issues, but it's made me hopeful for the upcoming games and excited to see what's in store. Thanks for watching as always. I've been Ken Kwame and I'll see you next time.